Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, a CPA with Dominion. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm that works for advisors as their tax professionals. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking a lot about testimonials and Google reviews and making all of those things compliant with Andrew Johnson. He is an experienced fintech entrepreneur. He previously co-founded Data Align Advisory, an RIA referral platform where he still serves as a board advisor. Before Data Align, he worked in management consulting with a focus on B2C marketing and in-product operations strategy with Meta, also known as Facebook. And he served 5 years in the Navy as a surface warfare officer, including 2 deployments on the world's finest destroyer, the USS O'Kane. I really wish we had time to talk about that today. I got to go to San Diego. There's a huge aircraft carrier museum there. That's fantastic. And then also Andrew earned his MBA from the University of Virginia and BS from Davidson College, and he lives with his family in Denver. So thanks for joining me today, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for doing the introduction. Summed it all up.
Yeah, we got the whole story from being on destroyers to TestimonialIQ. It's quite a journey. So thanks for coming on the show today. We originally got connected through LinkedIn. I was really impressed with what you guys are building, just because I'm a big proponent of really integrated marketing, onboarding, client experience. From my side of things, a lot of that translates into the advisor side of things. And one piece that I've found to be critically important is client stories and testimonials. And I know for a lot of them, unlike in my industry where there's not a ton of regulation around advertising, for advisors, it is the exact opposite. So I'm glad that we got connected, because I think what you guys are building and the message that you have and what you're doing is something that can be a huge value add for firms to be able to, really compete in the marketplace. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'd love to just dive in and talk about, could you just give like a little bit of the background on what TestimonialIQ is for advisors who aren't familiar with what you guys do?
Sure. TestimonialIQ is a reputation management platform. And so, those are table stakes in other industries, but the idea is they help make sure that firms are getting consistent flow of user-generated content that they can use in their own marketing, whether that's indirect marketing or passively to boost their SEO through things like third-party reviews. But because of the nature of the industry and how hard it is, like you mentioned, for advisors to do marketing, we're a reputation management platform that's also a compliance platform. So we're industry specific, and we're built 100% around SEC and FINRA regulations to make it so that advisors can take advantage of these new opportunities with the marketing rule in a way that keeps their compliance officers happy.
Yeah, no, and you took me on a previous phone call, you took me on a spin of what the platform looks like. And it's a really nice interface in terms of actually being able to work with these different the different testimonials that people leave and making sure that everything's staying compliant. You're not leaving stale ones up on your website or, that people are current clients, and just all the different rules that people tend to get get in trouble over, especially with some of the recent SEC activities we've seen. So I guess something that I always love to highlight on is, in terms of some of the outcomes that you've been seeing firms get from, being able to use your platform. What are some of the transformations that people have seen in terms of improving conversion rates when it comes to being able to actually have live testimonials?
So I think there's 2 pieces to talk to. So the first is getting found, and then the second is the conversions. So one of the reasons I think this is such a wonderful time for advisors is that because for 70 years, no advisors have been able to do this, to take advantage of testimonials and specifically third-party reviews, it's a really blue ocean opportunity. So, if you Google Thai food near me, you're going to find hundreds of results that all have 500 or 600 reviews, and it's really hard to stand out. Mm-hmm. But if you Google financial advisor near me, you're going to find thousands of results, and almost all of them have, an unupdated Google business profile, no reviews. And usually at the top, there's 3 or 4 that have actually started doing this. But the nice thing is, as an advisor, you might be able to get ranked in the top 3 with as few as 5 or 6 reviews. And then you don't need 20 or 30 new ones a month. you might just need one or two. And so we have a lot of small firms who say, oh, I only have 60, 70 clients. How can I possibly compete with a big brand name that's got thousands? And because they're not doing it. So the first is, we've seen a huge impact on the SEO from the advisors who are using us. And a lot of them, I think more than half at this point, have gotten into the top 3 of local search results when doing Google reviews. So that's been huge. But the second thing is, as you mentioned, the conversions. And this is, we don't track data on this because we don't track client conversion data for our clients. But unanimously, we've heard every firm that we've talked to, whether they're a client of ours or not, that's doing Google reviews, has said it has been the most cost-efficient form of marketing. And a big piece is that client conversion. And it's interesting because they don't talk about, oh, we get a flood of leads from Google. What they talk about is, well, a client or prospect that we've been talking to for 3 or 4 months, signed with us, and we asked them why. They said, well, I was evaluating you in firm X, and I read all these great things about you online, and I couldn't find anything about them. Mm-hmm. And so it's that extra element of proof that really seems to improve that conversion rate.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's something where, in our previous conversation, you were talking about how there's been real shifts and changes of consumer behavior. And I know this just from my own perspective of when I'm interested in something or I'm considering, switching a vendor or switching a software. It's like I will spend 80% of my, buying time doing my own research before I'll even talk to somebody. And I know that that's not unique. So in terms of like what you've been seeing in shifts in consumer behavior and when people are actually making these decisions, is that something that you think advisors should be aware of? Like, how have you seen things shift?
Yeah. And I think there's a few factors that are impacting that, right? I mean, online reviews came about and became a thing when online marketplaces were. So mm-hmm. I remember back when I was in junior high school and you're going to buy a new pair of shoes, you go to Foot Locker and, they have 10 pairs that fit you and you talk to the person and they show them down, there's 3 that they recommend. And then you really have to only pick between those 3 pairs of shoes and then you go home and you're good for 9 months.
Yep.
And then now that there's Amazon, you search for men's sneakers on, and you get 10,000 results. And so reviews became this heuristic for how do I filter the wheat from the chaff? How do I quickly make decisions? And I think for a long time, financial advisors, 1, they couldn't use them, but 2, it was a purely local business. And so, you hang up your shingle, you take people to the golf course or out to dinner, you hold some seminars, but you're not competing against 300,000 advisors. You're competing against those in your region. And that's not the case anymore. And people are starting their search on Google. They're looking for these online directories. I mean, it's why companies like DataLine, which I helped co-found, and Smart Asset and Zoe, and now there's new ones every week, are so successful, because people are looking for how do I connect with a qualified advisor?
Yeah.
And they're not just looking for who lives down the street from me. And so for advisors, to be able to compete in this increasingly digital world, recognizing that their online presence matters more than ever, I think is really important.
Yeah, no. And I think on top of that, the, longer term vision of, okay, are you going to be geographically centric or are you going to be more niched specific of how you're serving clients? And then if you do decide to go the niche route where it's, I'm going to specialize in anesthesiologists, or I'm going to specialize in, HVAC and plumbing business owners, or whoever it is that you end up deciding that you want to work with, like having those testimonials is just so much more powerful too, because then people will see that and be like, oh, this plumber gave you an awesome review. I'm a plumber too. This will work for me. So it just magnifies it.
And there's all the stats out there around how people trust user-generated content more than advertising. They trust as much as recommendations from a friend. But I think you can just kind of think, like you brought up, your own decision-making, right? I mean, think about if you're considering a restaurant and they say we have the best burgers on the planet, do you believe them? Well, if they have 100 reviews that all say this is the best burger I've ever had, you might. But if their average rating is 3.5, you don't really care what their messaging is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it highlights back to, if you're going through the process and the testimonials aren't what you want them to be, it's like, all right, maybe you need to take a look at the hamburgers, right? It's like,
and it's we have a lot of, particularly early on, a lot of early clients or prospects, the biggest hesitation was, well, what if I don't get a good rating, right? And like you brought up, I mean, 1, then you might have other problems, but 2, by and large, clients love their advisor or they would have left already.
Mm,
And, we did a big research project. We scraped all the data from Google and we found that sure enough, financial advisors have higher average ratings than other industries. They do very well. Their clients love them. Advisors just haven't been accustomed to asking. But as soon as
yeah.
they start asking that feedback, they realize, wow, people really do like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's always the people who are the hardest on themselves that end up doing the best customer service and usually the best job because they're always unhappy with how good they're doing. They're like, oh, but it could have been perfect. Like that
Yeah.
could have been 100% instead of a 98%. And I've found that just working with advisors as a client base that they're very perfection driven and very, well, we could like, it's like in sports games, like we could have done better. Like we could do better next time, kind of a thing. Even if you still won the game, it's like, they're still like, oh, well, we should have won by 50 points instead of by 20 points. That kind of a mindset, which is great. Like that makes for much better outcomes for the clients too. But that's good that you've said, some of them have been surprised. Like once they actually start collecting reviews, they're like, oh, wow, my clients really love me. Like I didn't realize,
Yeah.
which is that's a bit of an ego boost too. I know the big issue that a lot of advisors will like kind of, the flag goes up is when it comes to the compliance issues with this. And I know you've said that you guys have basically built, and I've seen internally, though I'm not an SEC person, I'm an IRS person, that you've built the platform really around the SEC rules and what's going on there. Could you speak to that a little bit? Because I'd like to diffuse that, tension in some, advisors' minds of, oh, like my platform wouldn't let me use that, or I can't get through compliance. Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025. That is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
First and foremost, every advisor should talk to their compliance expert. And, state registered advisors, I feel for them. There's about half the states that have deferred to the marketing rule, about half have kind of, holding out. And so state registered advisors need to make sure that they talk to their own expert. But, when we were thinking about whether or not we should build this, we reached out and we spoke with some folks who are actually at the SEC. And we said, hey, fewer than 10% of advisors are using testimonials. We think we can change that. But before we build this, we want to kind of show you the workflow and make sure that it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because the gentleman we talked to was frustrated. He's like, we spent years and all these man hours working on writing this rule, and now no one's taking advantage of it. Like, if testimonials out there, because the whole idea is we want potential investors to have more information.
Mm-hmm.
Testimonials are a great path. And I didn't bring up, well, maybe it shouldn't have been 430 pages. But,
why didn't anybody read our book?
Right? Yeah. So, but the point is, the folks there really do believe that testimonials are not just something that they're kind of giving to advisors to try to make a mistake. It's something that can truly help consumers make more informed decisions. So that's kind of the first point. But the second is, so much of it, and if you look across the enforcement actions, right, that most of them have been on pretty blatant things, right? It's been using testimonials you can't prove is actually a testimonial, right? Yeah. We're not including the disclosures, which that part of the rule is super clear, what disclosures you have to have associated with them. And, so much of it comes down to, I think back to the conversations we had with folks at the SEC, where the guardrails are designed, like all the other guardrails, to prevent misinformation and misleading statements. And so if you think about the testimonial process and you think about the things that could end up creating misleading testimonials, right? You don't want to, if you compensate, you have to disclose that you compensated. We always recommend don't compensate because it doesn't actually make your testimonials better.
Yeah.
Don't just ask your favorite clients, right? Or clients, will give a favorable response. To ask everybody. Make sure that the way you're asking isn't biasing it, right? Make sure you're not saying, I know you love working with me. I'd love you to write about how much you love working with me. And so much of that, it's shaded in 430 pages of complexity of the rule, but it really does come down to that. And so our platform was built around making sure that you can document this paper trail of, we asked in an unbiased way. We asked in a consistent process. We did it in a way that gave every client an equal opportunity to share their feedback. And really what's important is have a written process that documents. We think every firm should be doing testimonials that can, but before you do it, build a plan with your CCO, have a written process, and then make sure that when exam time comes, you can point to something and show that you followed that process.
Yep.
So not biasing the process, making sure that you're disclosing how you're doing it, the way you went about it. Every client gets an equal opportunity. And then when you get to third-party reviews, Google, that's where some of the initial concern, particularly in the early days, was really high, was, well, I can't control the content on Google, right?
Yeah.
There's no easy way to embed the disclosures. What if someone writes something I can't control? And so that's really the key of our platform, is everything was designed to avoid entanglement or adoption with that third-party content to keep the Google business profile from becoming an advertisement. So if you're not biasing the content or compensating for content that gets onto Google, you're not adopting it later, promoting it, telling people to go check out your Google business profile, you can keep that Google business profile from being an advertisement, so you're not held accountable for the content on there. You just have to be very, very specific about the process by which you're giving clients an opportunity to share feedback there.
Yeah, no, that's all good stuff to know. And so I think for people who are, this is going to be too much of a compliance nightmare, I don't want to do this. In terms of, I think last time we had there's a really great point that you made in terms of when you're a smaller firm having to compete with the bigger firms, like that initial value that, you were talking about this earlier on this podcast too. When for advisors who are listening to this and they're weighing that, do I want to open up the compliance can of worms? Is it worth it question? Can you speak to that in a little more depth of like some of the transformations you've seen for firms, and then, how they should be thinking about when it's time to implement a tool like TestimonialIQ to really, accelerate things?
Yeah, I might have mentioned on our first call, but there was a great study in Harvard Business Review on Yelp in the early days of Yelp, which showed that when Yelp would enter a new geography, it disproportionately benefited the small businesses over the chains, right? Because you don't need to read reviews about a TGI Fridays. You know exactly what you're going to get when you go there. But if you're in a new town and there's a local diner, that's a little more risky, right? And so I think the same is true for advisory firms, except there's fewer that are household names. So there's a lot more firms that can benefit, even from the larger firms. They're not a household age for an average name for an average prospective investor. And so, massive impact in terms of being able to immediately build trust with someone who's considering investing with you. They find you, they know that you have real clients, that people actually have nice things to say about you, all before they ever land on your website or even book an introductory call, right? Like you said, you spend 80% of time researching before you want to take a meeting. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts is people now expect to be able to build some degree of trust with the service provider before they take that call. They're not even going to get to that stage of, letting someone do it in person before they've done it online. So that's a big piece. And then in terms of when to engage with a firm like us, we tell plenty of advisors who are just getting started, if you get 10 or 15 clients, I'm always more than happy to jump on a call with them and give them some best practices. You don't need software for that. You just need to make sure you've got, one, you're probably state registered. So you've made sure it's okay there and your compliance person's on board. But two, then it's just about, hey, send an email to all your clients, give them all the opportunity, asking for feedback, tell them what's important to you. Where we really see the benefit coming in is once firms get 50 or 60 clients, particularly when firms have multiple advisors, compliance becomes harder and harder to do. And then you get the situation of, okay, if I'm examined in 3 years and I have to be able to go back and show that every single one of my clients got an email asking for feedback in the same way, are we going to be able to do that? And that's where we really, can provide a lot of benefit, particularly now with, some of our CRM integrations, and you can automate that. And then it's just one less thing for advisors to have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. I think before we sign off, what are some good ways for people to get in touch with you or learn more about what you and your team are working
Yeah.
on?
So, I mean, our website's testimonialiq.com. My email's andrew@testimonialiq.com.
Hmm.
Um, Easiest, like I said, I'm always happy to sit down with advisors and just kind of give them some best practices, things we've seen, and kind of walk through what might be a good approach for their firm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And also there's a white paper you did for KITSs, right?
That's right. Yeah, maybe we can
We'll
drop
throw
the
that
link.
in there too.
Yeah, we did a long research paper on Google reviews for financial advisors and went through both the compliance aspects of, how can you do this in a way that's going to keep you out of trouble, but also proving that people, one of the biggest points of, hesitancy we get is, hey, I'm an advisor. This is a personal relationship. Will my client always actually leave me a review on a public forum like Google? And I mean, the answer is yes. And I always show people a funny graphic of proctologist office with like hundreds and hundreds of reviews. I'm like, look, they'll do it for this, like they'll do it for their advisor. But we walk through showing, that people will leave advisors reviews. You just have to ask. And not only that, when you ask for reviews, your average rating goes up. And so, a lot of benefit to doing that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we'll post those links nearby, wherever you're encountering this, dear listener. Any other closing thoughts you have, Andrew, before we sign off?
Only thing I would say is just that, like, whether you're going to use testimonials in marketing or not, I would just encourage advisors to start getting in the habit of asking for feedback from clients. You can always choose to use them in marketing later, but worst case, you learn a little bit more. And we've seen a lot of, folks, I hate asking a favor of my clients, right? And I think remembering that people are used to that. That's an everyday part of business now. We all get those text messages, those emails asking to leave a review. It's really expected. And what you'll find is clients are a lot more excited to do it than you might think.
Yeah, especially if you deliver a great experience for them. They want to share that with other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Catherine.
And for those of you listening, we'll post those links nearby. And thanks again for listening in on the show. I'm always interested in getting your feedback and what you took away from this episode. So you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I'm always interested to hear what you took from this. But this was another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know show, and we'll see you next time.